In this video, I'll show you how ChatGPT's recommendations actually work. So if you want your brand to be recommended by ChatGPT, there are specific things that you can do. And a lot of the mainstream recommendations that you'll see online are actually wrong. So in this video, I'll show you how you can actually get your brand showing up in ChatGPT. This works the same for pretty much any LLM. I'm just using ChatGPT because it's the most popular and it's where most of the traffic is right now. I'm currently on ChatGPT 5 and using the auto mode, which is the default for most people using ChatGPT. Auto decides if it's going to think or give an instant answer. Next up, I'll give it a query. So I'm doing what's the best free online invoicing software, and then we're going to see what it creates for the answer. Now it's generated the answer and it's got three main sections. First up, when you ask a query like what's the best software, it's always going to give you about 3 to 5 options to choose from, and it's generally going to be the most popular software in the category. So in this example, we would want to be one of the 4 brands being mentioned by a question like this. So how do we actually do that? The answer is to look at the sources that are being used. If you scroll down to the bottom of the answer, there's a little sources box here. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to open up a sources sidebar. Now there's 2 important sections of the sources sidebar here. There's the main citations that were used for the answer. In this case, there's 4 main citations being used. And then there's a more section, which will have all of the other answers that it looked at. The important distinction here is that ChatGPT uses a triage method to select which pages it is going to reference. When you ask it a question that requires web browsing, it's going to run a few searches and rank the best answers. ChatGPT's search results aren't identical to Google search results, but there is a lot of overlap between them. So in ChatGPT, for the best free online invoicing software, we got Zoho, NerdWallet, Zapier, and Paymo. Then running the same search on Google in the United States, we got Zoho in number 5, NerdWallet in number 9, Zapier in number 1, and Paymo in number 8. The reason that there's 2 sections here, citations and more, is because it actually only opened and read these 4 pages. And for the rest of the pages, it actually only skimmed data from its SERP results. So it didn't open and read all of these pages. It only opened and read these top 4. In this example, most of the citations were actually best software roundups. And Zoho was the only landing page that's only talking about one software. If you look at the individual citations in the answer, you'll see that they're only the main citations, and it's not referencing any of the citations under the more category. And once ChatGPT has enough data to answer, it's going to answer. So by reading those 4 pages, it was able to recommend 4 good softwares, and it operates on a consensus. So by reading these pages, it learned that Zoho, Wave, Invoice Ninja, and Square Invoices were all frequently mentioned amongst all of them. So opening these roundups, we should find a lot of references to these 4 softwares. So on NerdWallet, we have Zoho, here's Wave, here's Invoice Ninja, and then we got Square Invoices. And then on the Zapier article, we got Zoho, Wave, no Invoice Ninja, and then we got Square Invoices. And then on Paymo, we got Zoho, no Wave, Invoice Ninja, and no Square Invoices. But from those articles, it was able to gather enough information to recommend 4 popular softwares that a lot of people are using. For examples like Square Invoices, it was only mentioned twice, and there were a lot of other options to choose from in these lists. But it likely went with Square because it's a more popular brand and it has a much wider reach than the other brands, which are not as well known compared to Square. So essentially, if you wanted to be showing up in ChatGPT for questions like this, your best bet is literally to figure out what are the main citations being used for that answer, and then check to see if you are being mentioned in those main citations. If you want to be highly recommended, your goal should be to get on all of the pages being frequently used in citations. And the only reason that these citations are being used is because they rank well in search results. So in this case, I'd want to be mentioned on this NerdWallet article, this Zapier article, and this Paymo article. For example, if I want to get on this roundup by Zapier, there's pretty much only two things I could do. Number one is I could reach out to the Zapier team and pitch them on why they should be mentioning my software. And whether or not they'll actually add my software is totally up to them. Depending on who is ranking in the main citations, they might be more open to mentioning your software, especially if the site that's ranking is an affiliate site where you can actually pay for placements in these lists. So that's the first method. You can pitch or pay or both, depending on the circumstances. Then the second way you can get mentioned is by becoming one of the top ranking brands for your category. Because when a writer is looking for software to recommend, so in this case, it would be free online invoicing software, they are likely also going to reference the first page of the Google search results. And they're most likely going to recommend the most popular software with the best reviews. So if you want to increase the likelihood that you get mentioned in a citation, the best things that you can do is rank on the first page for that target keyword organically and be a generally well-known brand with good reviews. That'll significantly increase the likelihood that you get mentioned in these listicles. What you want to do is rank well organically on search results. And the two best ways to rank organically for your target keyword on regular search results, number one, have a high authority domain, which is largely a byproduct of having lots of referring domains. You can see here Invoice Ninja has over 3,000 referring domains, and Invoicely has over 1,000 referring domains. The other half of that equation is basically just achieving topical authority. There are some tactical optimizations that can be done to increase your rankings for specific keywords. For example, Zoho only ranks number 5 right now, and Square only ranks number 6 right now for this specific query, best free online invoicing software, because pages like Invoice Ninja are more tuned for that specific query. You can see that they've put free invoicing software in their title, and Invoicely put free online invoicing in their title. But if you go to a broader search like online invoicing software, you're going to see the higher authority sites like Square and Wave ranking for those terms. There's some tactical things you can do to the actual page to help it rank, but overall topical authority is the best play, which is basically just having pages that rank for all of the major topics in your category. For example, Invoice Ninja has 360 pages that are all ranking decently well for invoicing related terms. Most of them rank on the first page for their target keyword and they drive relevant traffic. And getting the traffic is topical authority. Having pages that exist for all these topics is topical coverage. There's a big difference between the two. It's not topical authority until you're actually ranking and getting traffic. If you just have pages that exist but they don't rank or get any traffic, that isn't going to get you any topical authority, and it could even hurt your site. So ensuring that the pages you do make actually rank is also really important. Ensuring the pages that you make will actually rank and drive traffic is basically just a combination of three things. The first one is selecting the right topics that are going to drive traffic, like Invoice Ninja targeting invoice templates. And then you want to have a page that meets that search intent. In this example, Invoice Ninja has a page that meets the search intent. It delivers some nice invoice templates for people looking for templates. And it even has some supplementary content. There's probably some tactical optimizations that have been done to the page to help it increase in rankings as well. But overall, meeting the search intent is the main goal. And then the third part is having enough page rank for that page to perform on the SERPs. So in this example, this page has a URL rating of 14 and it's got 17 referring domains. And that is a sufficient amount to rank number 9 for invoice templates on the first page of Google. So going back to ChatGPT, let's break it down further and look at some other examples. So I'm going to ask it, how are you able to read so many web pages so quickly? So I'm basically trying to get it to confirm if it actually read all of these pages or if it filtered them. And here in the answer, it says it ranks and filters them. And of the filters results, it's only actually looking at the top context relevant chunks. In a case like this, it likely means that it is just looking at the shortlists at the top of each page to generate its answers. And then it is synthesizing what is common between them. Now I'm going to ask, how do you decide which pages to open and read further? And its answer is that it scores it on relevance first, then it samples for a consensus, and then it's only going to deep read certain pages to resolve conflicting information, gather important details, or if the site is a primary source, so in this example, that would be Zoho talking about themselves, or if the question needs more nuance. For example, it said Wave is best for freelancers, and it'll basically keep doing that as a loop until it is confident that it can answer the question. Now I'll ask why it picked these specific pages for its main citations. In its answer, it breaks down why it chose Zoho and NerdWallet and Zapier because they are very popular. They selected Paymo because they benchmarked fairly objectively. Then it breaks it down based on the main factors it used for primary citations. Now here's the kicker. ChatGPT wants to answer quickly, so as soon as it has enough data to answer the question, it's going to answer. It's not going to read every single page that shows up. It did a triage and filter to only pick the results that seemed best for the query, and it only extracted information from those pages. So now I'm going to ask it, were you able to gain sufficient data to answer based on these main citations used? And then it answers, yes, I was able to gain sufficient and balanced data to provide a good answer to the question, just looking at those main citations. In a case like this, the only thing that matters is getting mentioned in these 3 roundups, in terms of whether or not it gets mentioned in ChatGPT. That is because it filters the results, shortlists the most relevant pages, and answers as soon as it has enough information. The funny thing is, even though Paymo was one of the main citations and is an invoice software, they didn't actually get recommended as one of the main softwares to use. By them having this blog post that ranks the best invoicing software, they of course list themselves as number 1, but in ChatGPT, they're actually helping their competitors be mentioned more often, and they're not getting mentioned. So now I'm going to ask, why didn't you recommend Paymo in your initial 4 options, even though you referenced their article as a citation? And it basically breaks it down saying Paymo is largely a project management suite, and while they have invoicing features, they're not the best fit for a free online invoicing software. So hopefully you're starting to get the picture that there's not really any gimmicky things you could do to be recommended by ChatGPT, other than being an authority in your space and being mentioned in the top listicles being used as citations. So let's look at a few more examples in different industries so we can solidify this. Let's look at what's the best Google Analytics alternative. And we get a similar answer here. This time it actually did recommend a top product called Matomo, and then it listed some other top contenders like Plausible, Fathom, Mixpanel, and Adobe Analytics. So now let's look at the sources. It likely mentioned Matomo as the best alternative because it found the Wikipedia pages, and that likely gave it bonus points. Of its shortlist, it looked at the Plausible page, the Fathom page, and then 2 roundups to help it with its answer as well. And then in the More section, we have all of the results that it filtered out from its shortlist and didn't actually read. And again, if you look at the citations, you got your Wikipedia, Plausible, Fathom, Leadfeeder, and Dealfront. That is everything that is in the main citations here. Nothing else in the sources made it into the answer. And that is likely because by shortlisting and looking at some of the content on these pages, it was able to get enough information to answer. Then looking at the search results in the US, we have a lot of overlap. We've got the Leadfeeder page, the Plausible page, the Fathom page. Surprisingly, no Dealfront on the first page here. And interestingly, Matomo is also mentioned as the number 1 result in the AI overview. So if you were a Google Analytics alternative and you wanted to rank, your best options would be to get on citations like Leadfeeder and Dealfront, or basically rank on the first page for Google Analytics alternative. Like Plausible Analytics, they rank number 3 for the term. They have pretty high authority. They're using their homepage to rank. They've got 12,000 referring domains. Their homepage, which they're using to rank for the term, has a URL rating of 48, which is a representation of how much page rank that page has. So overall, they're doing a good job of being a leader in the category and ranking well. Fathom is also doing the same thing, They just have slightly lower authority. They've got 7,500 referring domains, and their homepage has a URL rating of 29, so a little bit less link juice there. And interestingly, even though Simple Analytics outranks them on search, they didn't get mentioned in this recommendation. Looking at these two pages from Leadfeeder and Dealfront, Simple Analytics was mentioned once, but they're number 25, so almost at the very bottom of the list. And they were not mentioned at all on Dealfront's article, but Plausible was mentioned on Leadfeeder and Dealfront, and Fathom was also mentioned on Leadfeeder and Dealfront. Because they rank well for the target keyword, and they're also mentioned in the main citations being used, they got shortlisted. Hopefully it's starting to make sense now. Now let's look at something that isn't in the software space. Let's look at best gaming laptops. And here's our answer. We've got our shortlisted websites: Tom's Hardware, rtings.com, Best Buy, Tom's Guide, and PC Gamer. And then a bunch of other results that did not get used in the shortlist for the answer citation. You can see that it even recommended parts based on the shortlisted citations. So we got Tom's Hardware there, rtings.com, Best Buy, and Tom's Guide for what to prioritize when buying. And in these citations, the Razer Blade laptop is actually mentioned in all of them. It's not the Razer Blade 14 exactly, but we got the Razer Blade 16, the Razer Blade 18, and it looks like these might have changed because it just came out. And here we got Razer Blade 16 and 14. So the Razer Blade is being mentioned a lot in all of the shortlisted citations. And then again, the Asus Tough Gaming laptop is mentioned in all of these as well. It's not the exact same model, and it looks like it's localizing it a bit for me to Canada, but it's the same idea. It is recommending the laptops that are frequently mentioned in the shortlisted citation sources. Then looking at the search results, this is a case where if you were a laptop manufacturer, you likely couldn't rank for best gaming laptops because it's going to be dominated by roundups. But we got Tom's Hardware here, Best Buy, PC Mag, rtings.com. I think that's supposed to be like ratings.com without the A. And they're actually on page 4 of the organic search results. But you get the idea. It's products that are most frequently mentioned across the shortlisted citations. Not every single article, just the shortlisted citations. So at this point, you're probably thinking, being mentioned in these top citations is going to be very tricky. And that is completely true. It's definitely a challenge to be shortlisted in a roundup in general, but then trying to be shortlisted in a roundup that is used in a ChatGPT citation is going to be even trickier because you want to be mentioned on very specific pages, and that might not always be possible. So let's look at one more example here. I'll show you how you can still get mentioned, even if you're not the #1 authority in your space. Let's say you're a smaller or newer brand and you still want to get mentioned. Here's what you're going to do. Let's say that getting mentioned for the best online invoicing software is challenging. We're going to narrow it down to one use case, like for startups. And if you're familiar with SEO, this is a common strategy going after more long tail queries. But in ChatGPT, this is a specific use case, and it's going to work in a similar way. And now looking at the answer, we have a couple of roundups that are specific to startups. Best invoicing software for startups by research.com. We got most flexible billing engines for startups by Orb. Then a few general roundups. And then we got Zoho and Wave, just their main pages ranking because of their massive authority. And another shortlisted one specifically for startups. Then looking at those specific startup focused articles, you can see brands like Zoho being mentioned in all of them. If you search on Google for best invoicing software for startups, you won't actually find startup specific articles. You're still going to get just best invoicing software for small businesses generally. But ChatGPT found these articles, even though they don't get any traffic and they don't rank for anything organically, they still made it into the shortlist because they're hyper relevant to what the user is looking for. Because these are lesser known brands and listicles, you have a much higher chance of getting mentioned on these versus mainstream listicles like Zapier. So in summary, if you want to be recommended by ChatGPT, your best option is to find what articles are being shortlisted for providing recommendations and then try to get mentioned in those shortlists. And the two best ways to do that is number one, to reach out directly to those shortlists. If the shortlist is an affiliate site, you might even be able to just pay to be added to the shortlist, or you might need to convince them why you should be mentioned. And then number two is to get mentioned naturally by being an industry leading competitor for specific target keywords. Because ChatGPT uses searches, and while it's not exactly the same as Google, there's a lot of overlap between the top results. So if you rank well organically, you're more likely to be added to shortlists because the editors creating those shortlists are using search results to help figure out the best options that they are going to recommend. The reason that these are the best strategies is because of how ChatGPT functions. When you ask it a question, it does a web search. It'll do a query fan-out process, meaning it'll search for a couple of different things. It'll filter out most of those results and create a short list of the most relevant options. And then it will read those specific pages and identify a consensus between them. The most recommended options are going to form its consensus, and it's going to answer as soon as it has enough information. ChatGPT is incentivized to answer quickly, so it's not going to read all 100 pages that it pulls up, and it's not going to mention 100 brands. It applies rapid filtering, so your goal is to be part of the rapid filtering process. In more competitive spaces, if you can't rank for your main keyword, you can start ranking variations of it using the same strategy. The only difference is it's going to be a lot less competitive to get ranking. And then overall, to just increase the likelihood that you're going to get mentioned, your main strategy is achieving topical authority in that space, which comes from having content that ranks and brings traffic, and then having sufficient page rank to ensure that you rank for your target keywords, which is largely a result of backlinks and internal links. So while it does lead back to traditional SEO best practices, the strategy of identifying the shortlists and trying to get on those specific shortlists is definitely a system that you can game, and it'll produce better results than just trying to get mentioned in general. Go ahead and try some searches in your industry. Look into the citations and the shortlisting functionalities. Try some of your main keywords and your variations and see what you get for your shortlisted results. You can also ask ChatGPT questions about how it came up with those answers, but overall, it's always going to follow that process. Hope you found this video helpful. I'll see you in the next one.